Welcome to another episode of Stories from the Edge of Life. We have another special guest today, Sandra Sternberg. Uh, Full disclosure, I've known Sandy. I've worked with her in the past in the capacity of her being a child life specialist. So, Sandy, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and then we'll proceed with the questions.
Okay, I'm Sandra Sternberg. I am the supervisor of child life services at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where I have worked for over 20 years. I have been a child life specialist for over 36 years. So my entire career has been spent doing this amazing job I get to do. And what a child life specialist is, for folks who don't know, we focus on, we're part of the interdisciplinary healthcare team. We focus on minimizing the trauma, the anxiety, the pain, the fear for children and adolescents of being in the hospital or medical procedures. Our professional organization, the Association of Child Life Professionals, has an emotional safety initiative. And recently they described child life specialists as emotional first responders. And I thought that that was an incredibly good description, because often we are the people on the healthcare team who can spend time with patients, spend time with families, to assess where they're at, to find out what they're afraid of, and to use developmentally appropriate explanations, therapeutic play, medical play, different things like that to help children and teens navigate their experience, whether they're there because they broke their arm or they're there because they've been diagnosed with a life-limiting illness.
Life-limiting illness
like cancer, or like cystic fibrosis, or irritable bowel disease, any of those kinds of things that put some limitations on what kids and teens and adults, for that matter, are able to do. And so our role is to help them navigate through what they're going through and help them with coping skills, so that they can do those hard things that they need to do and still be able to live life and enjoy as much as possible. So really normalizing the hospital experience and trying to make it have some positive attributes.
Great. That's a lot that you cover. Now, what I was thinking right before the interview was, anytime I requested the assistance of your services, I think the common underlying theme was you're sort of an advocate and a translator for what the child is saying and wants, and explaining that to the adults, because often we make assumptions and we don't know what to do when children are facing the kind of situations that you described. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's a fair statement. I mean, even pediatricians, pediatric intensivists, pediatric specialists, we treat the whole child, right? And in that is what's going on here. What are they thinking? What are they fantasizing? What aren't we telling them that they're making up in their imagination, which is often far more scary than the truth that we tell them, if we tell it in a way that they can understand. So a lot of what I do and what my staff does is provide education for our colleagues so that they understand development in a way that makes sense for them to be able to approach a child and talk to them and try to help them understand all the medicalese that's being thrown around. That's also important for parents to model for them, maybe best practices of how to talk to children and teens in the situation of illness, hospitalization, awaiting procedures, awaiting surgery, because it's a stressful event.
Yeah, stressful for the children, stressful for the parents, and stressful for the clinicians too. These are not easy for adults to deal with when they see children go through these kind of things. Now, you did mention therapeutic play.
Yes.
Could you elaborate a little bit?
Certainly. So play is the language of children. Play is how children learn best. In a healthcare setting, providing opportunities for play just to be silly has a therapeutic value. providing opportunities for play to help teach about an upcoming surgery. I have a lot of patients who have general surgical procedures, cardiac procedures, and so sitting with a bear and pretending that, having the child pretend that they're a doctor or a nurse or the surgeon operating on the bear, I gain a lot of information about what they really think is going to happen. One of my favorite stories that I like to share with students when I'm teaching them is about a 5-year-old girl who was having a tonsillectomy. When I asked her what she thought that meant, what she thought was going to happen, she tilted her head back and said, "They're going to cut me from here to here, take my tonsils out, and stitch me up like Frankenstein." So a 5-year-old knowing about Frankenstein, first of all, that's a flag. But then I probed a little further and asked her if she had older siblings, and she did in fact have an older 10-year-old brother. And that's what he told her. And so of course, that's what imprinted on her mind. And so we had to take a couple of steps back and talk about how the surgery was going to be performed and that she wasn't going to have giant scars on her neck like Frankenstein, and really help allaying those fears and fantasies that she had. For 5, not going into specific details about how a doctor takes tonsils out, but really reassuring her body will not be awake. There's a doctor called an anesthesiologist. That person's whole job is to make sure her body's not awake. And then reassuring her about pain management, which in all honesty is a huge part of my job, is using therapeutic play, therapeutic distraction, guided imagery, relaxation, deep breathing, all of those things to help with pain management, so that children and teens learn that they don't always have to rely on an IV medication or an oral medication to manage pain. There are many, many other things that we can do. And we also teach, instead of saying pain control, because we don't control pain. If we did, we could turn it on and off like a light. We manage pain, and there are a variety of techniques we use to do that. So I'm happy with the education I get to provide to patients, to families, but also to my colleagues, so that we can all speak a language that makes more sense to kids, teens, and families.
Well, I'm really glad that you were there to help assist that 5-year-old.
Thank you.
Now, if you could briefly touch upon the guided imagery and deep breathing, those are things that seem very cliche-ish. Do you find them effective in children?
I do, because kids are imaginative anyway. That's part of their development. So guided imagery, I'm not certified or licensed to do guided imagery per se. But what I do is just have children and teens and parents hone in on their senses. Describe your favorite place to me. Close your eyes and tell me what you see while you're there. What color, what colors, what things do you see? Tell me what you smell when you're there. I try to have them paint a picture using all of their senses when they're getting an IV started, maybe when they're getting a chest tube pulled, maybe when they're just waiting for surgery, and that waiting time is so seemingly long. So doing simple things like that. And if kids or teens aren't necessarily willing or able to describe their favorite place, then another form of guided imagery I use is I paint a picture for them. Let's go to the beach. Let's close our eyes. I want you to hear the sound of the waves crashing on the sand. I want you to feel how cold the water is when it gets between your toes. And so I might guide it, or the child might guide it. Sometimes the parent will guide it, because it's important for parents to maintain their parental role. And so assisting them in the ability to do that. So I do find it effective with a lot of kids and teens. Not everybody buys into it, and that's fine. We find what works for each patient and each family.
And the same holds true with deep breathing?
Yes. Yes,
Great.
we all, it becomes a family practice when everyone in the room just needs to take a deep breath. And so we have a couple of different things that maybe pair guided imagery. One of my staff people uses something she calls cupcakes and birthday candles. So even when we're teaching medical students, we make them participate. Everybody closes their eyes, and in their right hand, they will hold their favorite cupcake. In their left hand, they will hold however many birthday candles they want to. And so the practice is take a deep breath in and smell your cupcake, smell the butter and the sugar, the vanilla, the chocolate, whatever flavor it is, and then blow out your birthday candles. So we'll do that 2 or 3 times. And it's amazing how, whether it's the patient and the family and the caregivers or the students in a lecture, you just see everybody's shoulders relax and everybody sort of go, wow, that was so simple. And I feel so much better. So we really try to help our colleagues learn to do these simple things so that in the moment, if I'm not in the room or my staff people aren't in the room, they can use these things for their own practice, but also with the care they provide for patients and families. And if kids are NPO, they're not allowed to eat anything by mouth. We wouldn't use anything that's a food related deep breathing thing. So I tend to use the beach a lot, breathing in the waves, blowing them back out to sea, breathing them in, feeling them up on their knees, blowing them back out to sea. So we do it 3 or 4 times just to get everybody in that space of, I can breathe now. And so we will hear parents saying cupcakes and birthday candles, cupcakes and birthday candles. So I do think it's pretty effective.
Yeah, I think it is. I was imagining water in the on the beach, hitting my toes, in between my toes, and I think I'm going to have a cupcake right after this session.
Sounds great. I might join you later in that. Another thing that we use for deep breathing and works really well for incentive spirometry are pinwheels. You have to take a deep breath in through your nose, blow out nice and slow through your mouth. It's a visual distraction because of the actual pinwheel itself, but it's really good for incentive spirometry after a child or teen has had surgery, which they need to do deep breathing anyway. So we just try to incorporate everything into something therapeutic that's beneficial.
Great. Thank you for all that information.
Sure.
Now, I'm curious what got you into this field.
It's kind of a funny story. I've been volunteering with kids since I was 12 years old. So even as a kid myself, I gravitated toward children with special needs at school. I volunteered after school in the special needs class, and that spirit of volunteerism and gravitating toward children really stuck with me. When I was 15, I had a friend who got hit by a truck, a small truck. I was there, I witnessed it, I saw him, I held his head in my lap. He had things oozing out of his ears, and sadly, he died. There was a social worker at the emergency room of that hospital that really made an impression on me. And so I thought, oh, maybe I'll be a social worker when I grow up. When I got to college, somewhere along the way, I developed this interest in law. So I thought, oh, I want to be a police officer, knowing that I want to work with kids down the road, gang kids, kids at risk, etc. So I went to college. I went to Cal State Northridge here in the Valley, and I was a sociology major with a specialty in criminology. Back then, I was quiet and shy and not as confident as I've learned to be. And I had a professor who really did a number on me in front of my peers in a class of about 75 people. Called me a cream puff, told me I'd never cut it as a cop. It just wasn't cut out for me. Maybe I should be a school teacher. And so he really got to me. And so I switched my majors. I switched to child development, thinking I will go learn about kids, what they think about, what they are afraid of, what makes them tick, and anything I need to learn about being a police officer, I'll learn in the academy. Making that switch was a wonderful thing because I met a tremendous, inspiring advisor who guided me toward child life. She was the one who introduced me to what a child life specialist does. I did volunteer work at a local hospital, met a child life specialist, and from the first child that I met, that I saw what this woman did with her and how she helped her, I thought, that's for me, and I really want to do that. And so my advisor tailor-made the rest of my junior and senior year toward child life, because they didn't have that as a major or even as classes back then. It was a long time ago. And she helped me apply for a child life fellowship at Baylor Medical School in Houston that I got accepted to. So I did that for a year, and then they oddly made me the director of the program at the age of 24, which was incredibly overwhelming, but the best learning experience ever. And the rest, as they say, is history. I've always maintained my interest in law. In fact, I had the pleasure of participating back in 2018 in the Los Angeles FBI Citizens Academy. And so I did that for, it was a 2-month long academy that I graduated from in 2018. And so I got to have a bird's eye view of how the FBI functions and what their role is. And so I keep my toe dipped in the law side with the volunteer work I do for them. And then what I do for a career balances with the things I enjoy with children and families.
Wow. It's an amazing journey.
It's a crazy story.
So is on a personal note, like looking back, I know that experience you talk about with your teacher in front of the class, it was very unpleasant at that time. But do you think it was a blessing in disguise when you look at the big picture now?
100%. I'm grateful to him for not necessarily how he did it. He could have done it in a more gentle way. Maybe he was right, maybe he was wrong, maybe I would have been a great cop, who knows? But what I do know is I'm really good at what I do. I'm really good at being with children in traumatic situations. I'm pretty good with families. I'm a very good educator. So I do think it was a blessing in disguise. I've had a beautiful 3+ decade career providing this service to children and families.
Yeah, it's amazing how things work out in life sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
or often.
Yeah, I mean, my job is hard. It's a tremendous emotional investment, and I've really learned and try to pass on to others, finding that balance and leaving work at work. I think and you'll probably identify with this, as caregivers, we go into this for a reason. We want to help people. We want to make things better. We want to take care of others. Oftentimes in doing that, we forget to take care of ourselves. So I find myself telling parents, telling nurses, telling doctors, you have to refill your tank. If you keep running on empty, you don't do your best work, and it's noticeable. So helping people understand the importance of balance between work and home and other things that are important to you, having fun, laughing, crying, all of those things, because as a child life specialist, we are often the people who, like a social worker, get called to an end of life situation, get called to work with a trauma patient who's come into the emergency room, who get called to, I very often get called to be with a child when his or her parent is at the end of their life. So there are some really hard days. There are days with tears. Most days are laughter filled, but there are some really challenging, hard days and tough experiences that I actually have the privilege of being a part of.
Great. So how do you leave? What technique have you developed over the years to leave work at work?
I straighten my desk. I I have a separate phone for work, so I unplug it. I mean, I turn it off, I plug it in, I leave it there. I just kind of tidy things up. I turn off the lights, I shut the door, and I do my best to leave it there. And then I use my 45-minute drive home to decompress. And that way, when I get home, I'm home. And if I have family here, or I'm doing things with friends, or I'm hanging out with my dog, I am 100% in that moment rather than being in the work moment. It's taken a very long time to learn how to do that. They don't teach you that in school. And some people can innately do it. I was not one of those people. I was someone who I would maybe work 10 hours, maybe work 12 hours, and then I would take it home with me, and it wasn't healthy. And so somewhere along the way, I decided I can't, oh, I know exactly when it was. I have a son, one son, he's almost 24. When he was 8 years old, I picked him up from school. He had to go to after school care because as a single parent, I had to work. Picked him up from school, got home, was starting to get dinner ready. All he wanted to do was play a game of Trouble with me. And I told him, I can't play right now. I need to get dinner. We need to do homework. You need to have a bath. And he sat on the floor, Indian style, crossed his arms and said, you spend your whole day playing with other kids and then you don't have time to play with me, and I don't like it. And my son and I have always had such a beautiful relationship in terms of communication, that I was so thankful that he felt safe enough to say that to me. And from that moment on, I tried to work a little bit harder of, he's right. I need to leave my work at work and have enough for him, because he's my priority when I get home.
Yeah, and I think in his request of you to spend more time with him, he helped you create that boundary, right? Now, and how do you fill your tank?
I laugh a lot. I am an amateur photographer, so I like to, when I take my dog for a walk, sometimes on my phone, sometimes I take my other camera. I like to take photographs of anything that helps me feel better. I spend a lot of time with family. I spend a lot of time with friends. I cook, I bake. I garden. I like to watch things in my yard grow, so I like to nurture those things. Those are just a few. I like to play Scrabble. Those are just a few things that I do to refill my tank.
Great. Yeah, please share your pictures. We'll be happy to share those with our audience on social media.
Okay.
So how many child life specialists are there in this country? I'm assuming that they're not as many as needed.
Not as many as needed. I don't know the exact number. We're in the thousands now. I do know that.
Great.
Most children's hospitals, freestanding children's hospitals, have a substantial amount of child life specialists. At Cedars, there's myself as the supervisor, who also has the clinical responsibility for general pediatrics and pediatric ICU. I have another specialist who is our hematology oncology child life specialist and also spends time in NICU. And then I have a part-time person in our outpatient specialty clinic area. So we are a small but mighty crew. And hopefully in the next year or two, we'll be adding some positions.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your service. And thanks for being so, honest and self in the sense of showing us a window into your life and how you've got into this role and grown in it. I will say one thing. I'm going to read this out. I received this email from you yesterday, and I'm going to read this out.
Okay.
This is your email signature. Incredible things can happen if you have the courage and you're always kind. I think that embodies everything that you've said and shared about yourself.
You.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I hope we'll see you again.
I would love to. Thank you for having me. I feel very blessed to be here.
Thank you very much.
Did you like this story? If so, please subscribe to this channel and like and share the video. Want more? Buy the book, Stories from the Edge of Life, available now on Amazon for more stories like this. All proceeds support Palliative Care Network, a nonprofit dedicated to alleviating suffering and improving the quality of life for patients facing end-of-life issues. Consider extending your contribution by donating through the link below. Thank you for your support.